on House Bill 1299, and I recognize Representative James Kofal as the prime sponsor of the bill. Representative Kofal.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the committee. I usually come into bill, for the record, my name is Jim Kofal. I am representative from Hillsborough County District 32, comprising the towns of Wilton, Temple, and New Ipswich. I usually come in to present bills. I have something formal prepared. This time around, I'd like to speak a little more off the cuff. Because I think we've heard a lot of emotional testimony. I have heard this and other bills characterized as anti-trans. I know that many people in the room will not believe me when I say this. It is absolutely not my position and not my intention that this be an anti-trans bill. I do believe in anti-discrimination law, and my goal, my vision, is that we figure out a way to all live together and work things out. This bill is not a mandate bill. It does not mandate one position or the other, that people must use one bathroom or another. It simply says that public and private entities are permitted to establish policies that draw that distinction.
Can we, you know what, I'm sorry, we have somebody speaking. Can we thank you.
It simply says that public and private entities are permitted to draw that distinction. A number of years ago, there was a couple of enterprising people came up with the idea of an all-women's workout facility called Curves. That was wildly successful. It has since almost completely gone away, but I think it was wildly successful because women wanted spaces where they could feel psychologically safe, that they would not be ogled while they were exercising. You know, and I've heard that we don't want the state micromanaging. This is actually the bill that says the state's not going to micromanage it. We're going to give people the flexibility to create policies at the local level, at the business level, that works best for them. We have also heard statements about physical safety, and I will say emphatically, I do not believe that all trans people or most trans people are any more, I don't think are there any more or less dangerous than others. Here's the problem. We have a scenario where a male, I mean someone who presents as a male, looks like a male, has never made any pretense to live as a woman, can go into a restroom or a locker room, and there is, practically speaking, very little that can be done to prevent them from being in that space. So I don't believe that calls for a genital inspection. I think it's a pretty clear and easy call. And I think, you know, there have been references to lawsuits. I think the invitation to lawsuit is where we have that kind of a situation and somebody's asked to leave and they say, hey, you can't because I'm transgender, even if they're not. So the law actually states that in order to be protected under this anti-discrimination law, someone needs to sort of persistently present themselves as identifying as another gender. And yet, that doesn't cover gender fluid. It doesn't cover non-binary. It doesn't cover somebody who just for the day, for the first time in their lives, decides that being in the girls' locker room or the women's bathroom, that they are going to use that as a pretext for being in that space. It is absolutely true that there are predators There are many sex predators that are male who have never presented or claimed to be transgender. Those people currently have a way to get into women's spaces. This bill and others like it are simply attempting to establish enough flexibility that we can reasonably maintain separation of spaces. That's it. So with that, that concludes my testimony, and I will take questions.
Questions for this witness? Yes, Representative Tur and then Representative Rombo.
Yeah, thanks, and thanks for taking the question. So looking at the various bills that we're seeing today, this one seems to focus on the birth certificate as the definitive approach or way of determining biological sex. We got into that a little bit on the discussion of the last bill. This doesn't just say birth certificate, it says birth certificate at or near the time of the individual's birth. So I'm just trying to reconcile that with what you've been saying here about preserving safe spaces. Is this bill suggesting that the birth certificate that's your current birth certificate on file with the state is not the determinative birth certificate that you should be required, I guess, to carry in order to enter bathrooms or these other spaces?
So I think thank you for the question. The question, I think, assumes that I think the question sort of comes from a presumption that there will be a clear and standardized rule across the board for all restrooms and locker rooms across the state, everywhere, based on this definition. And that's not what this bill does. What this bill does is it says you may make those distinctions if you choose. And so a school district, for example, could make that distinction. The girls' locker room is for girls, the boys' locker room is for boys. What does that mean? Well, because I know we've heard concerns that other bills don't contain a definition of biological sex. This is the definition. Furthermore, there's been the issue of intersex individuals has been raised on a number of occasions. That too is a matter of flexibility and how would a school district handle that? How should a school district handle that? That would be up to the school district. So this is simply providing a definition which may be useful. If we say you may use biological sex as a means of classifying individuals, what does that mean? Here's what it means.
Sure. Yeah.
Thank you. So appreciate that, and let me say I do appreciate the effort to create a definition in this law. I guess what my setting aside the logistics of checking somebody's birth certificate, does this attempt to actually create a second standard for what a birth certificate is? I mean, I assume you're aware that you are allowed to petition the courts and change the gender on your birth certificate. And I assume that's why it says at or near. So now you'd basically be saying that the birth certificate that's your official birth certificate, court certified, would not be the birth certificate that you would be expected to produce in these circumstances. Is that correct?
Thank you for the question. So it's not clear to me that somebody would be expected necessarily to produce it, but it is defining biological sex based on that, what some people have called gender assigned at birth. It's the birth certificate that was produced at or near birth.
Representative Rombo and then Representative Scully.
Thank you. Thank you for taking my question. I believe you testified earlier that this enforcement here would not require genital inspection and that people would know. We've also heard testimony regarding the lawsuit in Massachusetts where a non-transgender individual was pulled out of a bathroom. Those seem in real conflict to me. What would this look like for enforceability?
Thank you for the question. I think when it comes down to enforcement, I think that is really, again, it's a matter of local policy. If you're in a school, for example, I think it can be clearly established who is a biological male and who is a biological female. If and that does not require a genital inspection at any point. If there is a business that does that, I think they do that at their own peril. So, I'm going to say I think there are numerous cases where there really is not a question, and so in this case, I think it sounds like it was a case of phenomenally bad judgment on the part of someone at that hotel. But I will still stand by my assertion that this does not require genital inspection, and I think that's hyperbole.
Yeah.
But I'm not asking about if there's not a question. I'm asking if there is a question and what actually happens. What do you ask somebody to produce? Where do you pull them? Who are you asking in the schools? Who are you asking in a facility? And I'm not hearing any, even theoretical, like what practically would happen.
Practically speaking, if I were running a business and I were not absolutely positively sure, I would simply stand down. That would be my approach.
Representative Scully.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Representative. Question on line 12 of page 1. It says a state agency is hereby created with the power to eliminate. Does this bill, if it's passed, call for the creation of a new state agency?
Thank you for the question. So no, it doesn't. So section, the first section up to line 18 is existing statute, and so Roman numeral 2 is new, and then lines 24 forward are a new section.
Oh, okay, thank you for clarifying that for me.
Other questions for this witness? Representative Birch.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative. As I understand your bill, you are exempting private employers from what we normally call anti-discrimination laws, at least in certain specific circumstances. Is that right?
Thank you for the question. So as a business, yes, when you use the word employer, it sounds, if you were implying that there are hiring, firing, human resources elements to this, there are not. So we would not be exempting anybody from we would not be carving out anything in that area from the anti-discrimination law.
Yes, Representative Ryan.
Raymond.
Raymond.
I know I should have brought a tent like Representative Ball did, but I didn't think about it. I'll have to make one. So thank you for letting me ask a question, and thank you for taking my question. I know that there are other states that have similar laws like Arizona and Texas, and I am curious about on page 2, line 4, it says at or near the birth certificate issued at or near the time of the individual's birth. And I'm wondering how this would apply in situations like what they're having in Arizona, for example, where a boy in Arizona who's a biological male had a typo on his birth certificate. So when it was issued, it said female. The parents asked for it to be reissued as male, but his school district wouldn't. So he's been playing on the girls' basketball team. Similarly, in Texas, there's the case of a transgender boy who was born female, has transitioned, has a full beard, and he consistently wins the girls' wrestling state competition because he's better, but he must play with the girls. Does your bill allow for, 1, changes in case of errors, or 2, changes in case of transitions that have happened?
Thank you for the question. So yes, because it is a bill that ultimately says policies may be set at a local level or by a private entity. Those inherently can be flexible and reasonable, whereas I think what we have today is not flexible at all.
All right, other questions for this witness? Representative Tur.
Yeah, thanks. Just one more, and I guess I'm following up on what I thought I heard as the response to Representative Rombo's question. So when she was discussing what would happen if there's, uncertainty or a conflicting situation, which seems fairly likely, particularly on the bathroom issue where there's, not a process to adjudicate. Were you saying that essentially the restaurant owner, I guess, in that scenario should not press their ability to differentiate when you said they should stand down? Could you explain a little bit more like what that means in terms of the applicability of a rule like this for that immediate situation?
Thank you for the question. So again, what this bill does is it allows for flexibility at the local level. In the case of a business, it allows for flexibility at the business level. When I said if I were the business owner, I think my decision at that point would be to stand down. In other words, I think that if a business wants to enforce a rule, and let's just use a completely different scenario, a no shoplifting rule, and somebody walks out of the store and you think that they have something hidden under their coat, do you stop them, confront them, and force them to take off their coat? As a business owner, I'm going to consider how sure am I that they are shoplifting. And if I'm that sure, I mean, really, I'm going to call the police at that point and let them handle it. In this case, it's not a criminal violation, so I don't see the police being called necessarily unless there's a trespass issue, which I don't think there is. If somebody is somewhere that they are not supposed to be, you ask them, please leave. And if they don't, then there is, then there is a potential trespass issue.
Other questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank
All right,
you.
now next, we're gonna go back to the sponsor has now testified. We're gonna go back to the 2-minute rule, and I will next call on Representative Alice Wade, please.
Good morning, members of the committee once again. For the record, I am Representative Alice Wade from Dover, Ward 2, and I'm here today to oppose this legislation. I will give anybody in this room $100 if you can prove that I am trans right now, without just quoting me, openly sharing that information. You can't. The sponsor was correct. There is no enforcement mechanism in this bill. There is no clear way to do this. And so you get this patchwork solution, quote unquote solution, that isn't actually working and will just result in so many people getting accused wrongly or rightly and having the police called on them and all of these insane things. Bathrooms are for going into a stall, doing your business, getting out of the stall, washing your hands, and leaving. What this bill does is it basically says me going into the women's room is now a crime. Even if I just I just go in, I wash my hands, do my business, that turns that into a crime. This bill does not prevent any of the harassment or any of the crimes that it pretends to. It doesn't. If somebody's going to commit a crime in the restroom, that is already a crime, and they are already going to do it. This does not prevent any of that. It is unenforceable. It does not actually solve the issues it pretends to address. All it does is dehumanize trans people and claim that we are inherently, just by existing, just by not doing anything, but just by being there, that we are violating privacy and safety. That is discrimination. To claim that an entire class of people is doing that just by existing in the same space. That is not okay.
Thank you very much. Your
Thank
time
you.
is up.
Happy to answer any questions.
Questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you very much. Next, I'm going to call on Amy Terranova and Terranovia, and next online will be Jennifer Smith.
Good morning again. It's Tara Vecchia.
Tara Vecchia, sorry.
That's okay. We're going to get very well acquainted with one another this morning. So you've already heard part of my testimony against another bathroom bill this morning. I wanted to also just bring to light, again, my name's Amy Teravecchia, I'm with 603 Equality, and just kind of preemptively answer two questions I heard from committee members a little bit earlier for other folks in case those come up. But I was born and raised in New Hampshire. I've known trans people my entire life. And I am a queer woman, and I am not ashamed to be associated with trans people. I am honored and privileged to count trans and intersex folks among my friends and my community. And I do not feel threatened when in their presence at all. This bill, just like the other bathroom bills, I have serious concerns about safety and privacy. I have serious concerns for myself and for all Granite Staters. So not just the trans community, although I do think that this policy is discriminatory and unfairly attacks them. But I also have very significant enforcement concerns about what it looks like for all people using restrooms and what it looks like for business owners and what it looks like for the future of Granite State residents. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions for this witness? Thank you very much. Seeing none. All right, Jennifer Smith, and on deck will be Simon Amaya Price.
Okay, thank you again. This time I won't unplug people. I'm sorry about that. So basically, I want to go through this as quickly as I can and invite questions if you want. The first section just tries to erase intersex people and their experiences, and it's really offensive. The medical profession in this world where everybody's expected to be binary has done this, and we have finally begun to learn that this is wrong. So somebody, including me, potentially when I was in practice, is called to be the pediatrician at a birth as a family practitioner. I did do that, and has to decide what sex this child is. And routinely, people kind of got together with their colleagues and said, well, geez, how will they get along better in this world? And assigned a sex. That may not fit that individual. I have no idea, my friend Pasha, and I don't want to know what the birth certificate at or near the time of birth says. Pasha feels most comfortable going to a men's room. I would not feel comfortable in a men's room, and I would not feel safe in a men's room. So, that's first. Second, multi-user facility. Everybody's talked about that to the extent that this is just crazy. How am I going to know before I go someplace that I have no place that I'm allowed to pee by the people who are running that place? Third, the athletic and sporting competition is ridiculous. Transgender girls who've never experienced male puberty probably have a disadvantage because women have testosterone starting at puberty. Much lower than most men by far, but sometimes much higher than the average woman.
Your time is up. Right? Is there questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you very much. Next, Simon Amaya Price, and on deck will be David Trumbull.
Good morning, representatives. Long time no see. I wanted to address Representative Wade's question. Humans and almost every other sexually dimorphic species on the planet have spent millions of years evolving the ability to differentiate male from female. Of course, anybody with the correct angling and a subscription to Adobe Photoshop can make pretty much any man look like a woman in the right photo. And pretending we don't have the ability to in person tell the difference between male and female is sophistry. On another note, I think you're all aware of the recent shootings perpetrated by transgender identified men in Canada and Rhode Island. I hate to say this, but I wasn't surprised. I have been receiving regular death threats from trans identified men for over a year now. I know many brave women in the same situation. Some of them have even posted pictures of themselves with semi-automatic rifles and other firearms. When I was trans, I spent a lot of time around other trans-identified boys and men. If everyone in this room knew what I heard in those spaces, there would be no debate on any of these bills. There's a significant overlap between trans-identified men, incels, and neo-Nazis. In fact, the transgender Rhode Island shooter had a Nazi tattoo. A common word used by many of my former peers was transmaxing. This is the process of transitioning specifically so that they will have an easier time getting access to women. If any of you are familiar with incel culture, you will know that it is extremely and deeply misogynistic. I would contest that it takes a significant amount of misogyny to believe that you can become a woman by taking estrogen, getting breast implants, and putting on makeup. Many of the trans-identified men I interacted with would regularly leverage their transgender identities to gain power over women, especially lesbians who did not want to sleep with them and women who did not want to undress in front of them. They called these women TERFs, Nazis, and transphobes. A note on bathrooms. Bathrooms are currently done on an honor basis. Right now, there's one sign that says men, and for the other bathroom, it says women, and sometimes we have gender-neutral bathrooms. There's no way to verify somebody's gender identity.
Your time is up.
All right.
Thank you. Questions for this witness?
Happy to answer anything.
Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, David Trumbull, and on deck will be Ty Thorpe?
Still me. Thompson.
Thompson, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm David Trumbull from Ware. I oppose this bill. The bill's basic claim is that it doesn't mandate discrimination, but what it does is it permits discrimination under government authority, which goes to the very opposite of what a civil right is. We haven't heard testimony about the institution, so I'll focus on mental health in prisons. I was a mental health lawyer, did several hundred cases representing people who would have been in the state hospital. Under RSA 135C 56 fundamental rights, people have a right to treatment if they're committed to the state hospital, and C57 treatment rights, they have the right to consent and refuse to treatment. People have to consent to the treatment plan that they are given. Having a transgender woman be put into the male ward and forcing her to receive treatment there would be the opposite of good treatment, not good treatment. So this bill would basically have the state permit actions that discriminate against women in the mental health system. On the prison system, it's a double punishment because people who are transgender are 13 times more likely in prison to be sexually assaulted than not. 50% will be raped, 85% will end up in solitary confinement, 50% for over 2 years against their will. So what happens is if you commit a crime and you're a trans woman, under this bill, you would be put into the male wing, you would be raped, then you would be put in solitary confinement. You'll be punished once for the underlying crime and the second time for being transgender. This bill says it solves the problem by just permitting, not mandating. But what it does is it permits discrimination with government sanction. Thank you.
Questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you very much. Next, Ty Thompson, I'm sorry, and on deck will be Pasha Roberts.
Thank you. My name is Ty Thompson, Nottingham, New Hampshire. My pronouns are they, them. This legislation is particularly dangerous because it allows for individual and institutional choice to discriminate. By legalizing individual choice and enforcement, you are effectively deputizing the public to police gender. As we heard in the introduction of this bill, the default is what the person looks like. I have had other people have opinions about which restroom I should be using since I was old enough to use the restroom by myself. Pre-transition, post-transition, it doesn't matter. So what we're talking about is policing what people look like. We're policing archaic gender norms. We're creating opportunities for people in the general public to imagine power and authority to assert their own will in a situation that is not theirs to define. I read comments online about proposed legislation like this where people talk daily about imagined violent responses to what they perceive as threat. It's an imagined threat. I feel uncomfortable in public restrooms. I try not to use them, right? Largely because of what I read. And when I go in, what I need to recognize is that my own discomfort does not necessarily mean that I'm in that moment unsafe. And we need to ask our general public to do that as well. If you don't understand what's happening, you can do what I do. You can wait for the restroom to be empty. You can find a single gendered restroom. Perhaps structurally in our communities, we can rethink the way that we create restroom spaces. Most people would prefer not to pee with other people or, poop with other people, whatever. Like a little bit of privacy is nice. Like we don't, like perhaps what I'm saying is we can find structural changes to create and center a greater sense of safety for our community at large that doesn't involve policing people's bodies and inviting the general public to be deputized in making that assumption and feeling authorized to figure out how they're supposed to enforce it verbally, physically, calling
Thank you
the
very
police,
much.
whatever.
Your time is up. Questions for this witness?
Sorry. Yeah.
Yes, Representative Rambo.
Thank you, and thank you for taking my question. So if I understand your testimony correctly, do you read this bill as legalizing discrimination based on physical appearance?
Yes.
Yes. And allowing discrimination based on individual discomfort?
Yes.
Thank
That's how I read it.
Right.
And I think it will serve to police women's bodies, which like cisgender, transgender, whatever, policing women's bodies is associated with greater rates of intimate partner violence, homicide, you know, like any legislation that increases policing of women's bodies decreases safety of women in all aspects of life. You can like look historically for that. So like the premise that this is about keeping women safe is not true. This is just about like othering, and it's really just about othering and perpetuating fear-based control of the masses. I don't know
All
what
right,
else
other
to say.
questions for this witness?
Thank you.
Seeing none, thank you very much. Pasha Roberts, and on deck will be Claire Abernathy.
Here's my pen. So, Judiciary Committee, I am Pasha Roberts, and I live in Wilmette, New Hampshire. I'm on the board of 603 Equality, and I am in opposition to HB 1209. I'll keep it short. Again, the governor has already vetoed near identical bills 3 times. As with SB 268 and all the clones, biological sex is not biologically defined. There are no methods defined to determine biological sex on a physical, hormonal, or genetic basis. You wouldn't know what to do with me. Indeed, medicine has no methods to offer. We'll see that in further testimony. But sex is just not a clear-cut category in nature as people have defined. It is not clear. This just brings us back to the prison guard or school nurse or the awkward mall cop observing genitals with no consent. And there's a case in Utah where it was high school girls soccer, one team won. They were concerned, or they were jealous really of one of the large players, and they made her go through an inspection more as punishment. They knew she was a girl. They just wanted to punish the other team. We're going to see that here when we start doing that. Many of you consider yourselves to be proponents of small government, of freedom and liberty. Small government does not peek into its citizens' pants. Instead, we're proposing a state-led gender police with no biological definitions, put into the wild with no thought to enforcement. The governor knows all of this and will veto this again. Let's save the effort and declare this bill ITL.
Thank you. Questions for this witness? Seeing none, Claire Abernathy, and on deck will be Cameron Munz.
Hello again. I'd like to focus on the prisons aspect of this bill. Is everything okay?
Go ahead.
A friend of mine, Forrest Rom, wrote an article in The Hill documenting the experiences of the women housed in Massachusetts' only women's prison, MCI Framingham. I'd like to read you an excerpt of this article, and I'd be happy to share it with any of you after this hearing. At MCI Framingham, male inmates learn to frame their demands as discrimination claims. Guided by a well-resourced network of legal advocates, sensitive to litigation risks, prison administrators comply, even extending preferential treatment. For example, starting in July, the male inmates at Framingham were granted exclusive shower periods, during which female inmates are locked in their cells. Women, in contrast, are still required to share communal showers with those same men who choose instead to shower during general population hours. Once a judge confirms their placement, it's very difficult to transfer these inmates back to male prisons, regardless of their subsequent conduct. To date, no behavior, no matter how disruptive or violent, has resulted in any male prisoner's removal from MCI Framingham. Female inmates are describing being harassed and abused by these men, but fear institutional reprisal if they report it. Most women I interviewed said prison officials routinely minimize sexual assault allegations against trans-identified inmates, while female accusers are dismissed, discredited, or punished. Some alleged victims gave me detailed written statements supporting their accounts. One woman incarcerated at MCI Framingham told me that she was raped by a male prisoner in November and that authorities responded to her complaint by placing her in restrictive housing. She's now confined to a locked cell and permitted to leave only once per day briefly to shower. I share this not only to highlight the harm done to these women, but to address the claim that there is no evidence that allowing men into women's spaces increases the rate of violence against the women. When women are punished for speaking out about the harm done to them, the well is tainted and it becomes impossible to collect that data. Thank you for allowing me to speak again, and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you very, well, oh, I'm sorry. You have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just didn't write down where you found the article.
Yeah, it's written by Forrest Rom, Forrest in The Hill.
The Hill. Okay, thank you.
If you would like a link to it, I'd be happy to email you after this hearing.
Thanks.
Thank you. Other questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you. Cameron Munz, please, and on deck is Chris Erkel.
How you doing? Just to remind you, my name is Cameron Munz. I am actually a New Hampshire resident for nearly 40 years now, so this would directly affect me and my friends. Representative Colfault stated that enforcement would start with how am I sure? Quite frankly, it's none of your damn business. Last year, Rep. Mazur, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing it. She is behind me, so correct me if I'm wrong. Assumed that I'm a biological male. That turned out to be wrong. So harassment for me in the women's room, which is where this would put me, would be warranted or encouraged. I'm not 100% sure. Again, none of your business. If someone's going in there and they're not doing anything, no one's business, right? We can all agree that privacy is super important. If someone's violating another person's privacy or safety, do we not have laws already in place? A couple years ago, I had a conversation with Senator Keith Murphy in which I asked him about these bills and what loophole they were plugging, and he could not give me an answer. There is no reason for this. The only reason for this is, again, the trans obsession of folks who are on the right side of the aisle. So I would urge you to put it to rest. ITL, let's all go home.
Questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you very much. Chris Erkel, please, and on deck is Kelly Twiss.
Thank you, Chairlin, members of the committee. My name is Chris Urchel, and I am an attorney with GLBTQ Legal Advocates and Defenders. I just want to highlight something really specific, that problem that this bill brings up. Title VII is a federal law that prohibits discrimination in employment nationwide. In 2020, the United States Supreme Court ruled unequivocally that when an employer discriminates against a transgender employee, that is sex discrimination and violates Title VII. And so this is very clearly the law of the land. New Hampshire, the state of New Hampshire, has a contract with the U.S. government to enforce Title VII on behalf of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. And that enforcement power entrusts the New Hampshire Commission for Human Rights to enforce federal law with respect to employment discrimination. Setting up this carve out for New Hampshire state law creates a conflict between federal and state law, and it is unclear how the New Hampshire Commission for Human Rights is supposed to be able to enforce its, as it's obligated to enforce discrimination law on behalf of the federal government when this bill would preclude the ability for the New Hampshire Commission for Human Rights to enforce state law in that same respect. Happy to take any questions.
Questions for this witness? So I guess I do have one question. My recollection of the case, that's the one that Gorsuch wrote, I think, was the author. Wasn't there language in there specifically saying we do not address in this case the issue of the kinds of things covered by these bills? It dealt specifically with employment.
Yeah, it was an employment law. Well, I mean, this bill obviously would impact places of employment, right? But you're correct that there was specific language saying this bill is about decisions, hiring and firing decisions made around sexual orientation and transgender status. And so, of course, naturally, the Supreme Court does not decide things outside of it. But when an employer tells a transgender woman who works for the employer's business, you cannot use this restroom, courts pretty much uniformly have said that that is employment discrimination that violates Title VII. So every court interpreting the Bostock decision that Gorsuch wrote in 2020 has come to that same conclusion.
Other questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm going to call on Kelly Twiss, and next will be Diana George.
Hello again. I'm here to oppose House Bill HB1299, which attempts to define biological sex as what is listed on a birth certificate issued at or near birth. But birth certificates are not documents people typically carry in daily life. And the bill never explains who would be allowed to ask for one, under what circumstances, or what happens if someone declines to provide it. This creates significant ambiguity. Without clear standards for enforcement, compliance risks defaulting to informal judgments based on appearance rather than documentation, which raises serious privacy concerns and opens the door to inconsistent or unequal treatment. When a law invites people to determine gender or try to determine gender without explaining how that determination is actually made, it risks encouraging a kind of informal policing. In practice, that can look like people lingering outside women's restrooms or locker rooms, scrutinizing the bodies of women and girls, their clothing, their voices, their appearance, trying to decide whether someone is female enough. This isn't privacy protection, it's surveillance, and it's dangerous. A law framed as protecting privacy should not create situations where people feel pressured to disclose personal records, justify their bodies, or defend their presence in public spaces. If anything, that undermines the very privacy interests the bill says it seeks to protect. It also expands biological sex separation beyond bathrooms and athletics into correctional facilities and involuntary settings, environments already governed by complex federal standards and constitutional protections. That significantly broadens the bill's impact while leaving the same fundamental enforcement questions unanswered. Ultimately, this bill does not protect privacy or safety. What it does is risk increased scrutiny of people's bodies, inconsistent enforcement, unnecessary conflict in public places, and potential legal challenges for both institutions and the state. Those consequences.
Thank you. Your time is up. Questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you very much. Diana George, please.
Hello again. I want to say again that I am representing myself, not my employer, the Department of Corrections. I want to talk a little bit about my own experience as a nurse at the Department of Corrections. I will tell you that there are transgender inmates at my prison. The Department of Corrections already has rules in place as to how these people are housed. And female to male transgender inmates are housed with the women. And I can tell you from my own experience that not one time has there been an issue amongst the cisgender inmates against the transgender inmates. These people have their own bathrooms, stalls that they go in one at a time. They're not shared. And if there is a disciplinary problem, that gets resolved in just the same manner as any other inmate. They get placed in a cell of their own, and it gets reviewed until there's a decision made. It's part of the policy. So I just want to make you aware that there's already rules in place.
All right. Thank you. Questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you very much. I don't have any other pink cards on HB 1299. Is there anyone else here who wishes to be heard on 1299? Seeing none,